Welcome to the Killer Innovation Show, the longest continuously produced podcast in history. Each week, Phil McKinney brings you the insights and strategies to amplify your creativity and innovation skills. Here's your host, Phil McKinney.
Have you ever been on a project where you just know there are people on the team who don't agree with the idea or don't agree with some part of it, but they're not expressing it? You just know that there's some concerns running around on the team, but nobody's willing to discuss it. Nobody's willing to put the issue on the table. What do you do? How do you get around that? That is the topic for today's show. Today, we're going to talk about this challenge of getting people to open up. Think about ideas in your innovation projects from all angles. And it uses a role on your team that you should strongly consider appointing. And that is the devil's advocate. Having somebody on your team play that role formally, not just to be a naysayer, but to make the idea better. So what we're going to talk about today is, what is this role? How does it exist? How do industries use it already? And how to think about it in the context of making your ideas better and making your innovations better. But before we hop into today's episode, got that favor to ask: follow, like, and share. Follow us on social media, like us, give us a thumbs up, give us a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcast, and then share it with others. Share it so that other people can hear about the topics, and it may be something that they're working with or struggling with right now. So without further ado, let's hop in to this week's episode. Innovation is often lauded as the key to success in business. After all, it's hard to stay ahead of the competition if you're not constantly coming up with new ideas and ways to improve your products or services. But is every idea you come up with a good idea? Is there such a thing as being too innovative? To keep yourself honest, you may want to consider appointing a devil's advocate. The Devil's Advocate is a popular movie from the 1990s. It tells the story of a lawyer who is hired to argue against a candidate for a high-ranking position in the Vatican. The lawyer's job is to poke holes in the candidate's qualifications and to find any dirt that might disqualify him. While the movie is fictional, the idea of a devil's advocate is real, and it's something that companies sometimes use when they are considering new ideas or making changes within their organization. The aim is to have someone whose job it is to argue against the proposed idea in order to improve the idea by making sure that all of the potential problems with it are discussed and addressed. Now, the term devil's advocate comes from the Catholic Church. It is the process of canonization, which is the process of declaring someone a saint. There is a devil's advocate whose job it is to argue against that candidate's sainthood. The idea is that if the devil's advocate cannot find anything wrong with the candidate, then he or she is probably deserving of sainthood. Now, there are a few reasons why companies might use a devil's advocate. First, it can help prevent groupthink. Groupthink, when people are working on a project together, it's easy for them to get caught up in thinking that their idea is great and should be implemented immediately. Devil advocates can help to forestall this by giving other people a chance to voice their objections and to point out any potential problems with an idea. Second, it can help to ensure that all of the stakeholders are on board with a decision. When you're considering a new idea, it's important to get input from all who will be affected by it. The devil's advocate can help to make sure that everyone's concerns are considered before a decision is made. Third, it can help to ensure that a decision is well-reasoned and thought out. When you're considering a new idea, it's easy to get caught up in the excitement of it and start thinking about all the ways that it could be successful. But it's also important to consider all of the ways that it could fail. The devil's advocate can help to make sure that you're thinking about both the potential positives and the negatives of a decision before you make it. There are a few potential drawbacks to using a devil's advocate as well. First, it can lead to decision paralysis. If you're considering a new idea and you have someone whose job it is to shoot it down, it's easy to get caught up in all the potential problems and never actually decide to go forward or to kill it. Second, it can frustrate the people who are working on the project. If you're constantly being shot down by someone whose job it is to find fault with your ideas, it can start to feel like your work is never good enough. And third, it can lead to a negative work environment. If people feel like they can't share their ideas without being shot down, they just might stop sharing them altogether. This can lead to a work environment where people are afraid to take risks, where new ideas never get a chance to be heard. Overall, there are both positives and negative aspects of using devil's advocates. It's important to weigh the pros and cons carefully before deciding whether to use them on a project. So if you decide to use a devil's advocate on a project, there are a few things you should keep in mind. First, it's important to make sure that everyone understands the role of the devil's advocate. The person identified as playing this role should not be trying to kill the idea outright. Their goal should be to make sure that all the potential problems with it are discussed and considered. Second, it's important to give the devil's advocate enough time to do their job. If you're considering a new idea, you shouldn't just shoot it down as soon as someone raises an objection. Take the time to consider all the objections and to see if there are any valid points that need to be addressed. And third, it's important to make sure that the decision makers are the ones who ultimately decide. The devil's advocate can provide valuable input, but they should not be the ones making the final decision. That should be left to the people who are responsible for implementing the idea. Now, we've all run into this. When we run into someone who starts off a statement with, quote, "Oh, I'm just playing the devil's advocate," end quote, it is usually a sign that they are about to say something which they know is going to be controversial. It's a way of trying to distance themselves from an idea in a passive-aggressive way. The problem with this approach is that it rarely leads to any kind of a productive discussion. The individual raised objections to an idea, but instead of providing constructive criticism, they'll just nitpick and try to find fault with everything. The effect is to shut down the conversation because people feel like they are being attacked. It can also make a person who's playing devil's advocate look like they're just trying to be difficult for the sake of it. If you find yourself in a discussion with someone who is, quote, playing the devil's advocate, remind them the role is a formal one, and if they're volunteering for it, they need to play by the rules. If they're just trying to be contrarian, close down that conversation. So what are the rules of a devil's advocate? Now, if you're being asked to be the devil's advocate, it can feel like being on a debate team. In debate, you are given a position and you must argue for it even if you do not agree with it. The same is true of being a devil's advocate. You have to be willing to take on the role and argue for the other side, even if you do not agree with it. So, here are the 10 rules that will help you be a better devil's advocate. 1. Present an argument against a proposal or idea without necessarily believing in that argument. Do not go in half-hearted. If you've been asked to be the devil's advocate, work out what a valid argument would be against that idea. and argue that, present it against it. Challenge the other team, challenge the individuals who has coming up with the idea. Do it in a professional way, but don't do it half-hearted. If you really think it's a great idea and you've been given the challenge of being a devil's advocate, don't just half-hearted. Work out a really strong argument. The argument of what somebody in your mind who would be against it, what would they say? What would be the points they would make? Present an argument against the idea, even though you may not agree. You may think it's a great idea. Number 2, identify and explore potential problems and objections to a proposal in order to improve it. Don't come up with just ideas or problems with it and list them all out. Can you get to 50 problems with an idea? But find those ideas that, if they get addressed, are going to make this proposal, this idea, this innovation so much better than what it is already. Number 3, provide alternative perspectives and challenge assumptions. Understand what those assumptions are. You're not just about the idea. You're not being the devil's advocate for just the idea, but you want to understand how the idea emerged. What are some assumptions that are baked in to this idea, and challenge those assumptions. Also, if the team working on the idea is coming at it from a very specific perspective, come from a different perspective. Come at it from a complete 180-degree opposite from where that team is thinking about. Number 4, force people to think about an issue from all sides and consider all options. The best way to do this is by asking questions, not by just shooting at them and forcing them to say, well, you didn't think about this, and why are you not considering that? Ask questions. Ask questions that force them to think about the issue from all sides. All sides could be, if you're doing a product or service, it could be from all the different customers. Oh, well, let's talk about it from consumers. Let's talk about it from small business. Let's talk about it from large enterprise. It could be something, a change within your organization. Let's talk about frontline staff. Let's talk about finance department. Let's talk about this perspective from IT. Let's talk about this from the executive in the organization. Force people to think about an issue from all sides and consider all options. Number 5, encourage critical thinking and healthy debate. As the devil's advocate, it's not your job to come up with every one of the concerns or every one of the problems. However, you are the person that people will come to. You're that safe area where they can come to you and say, hey, I know you're playing the devil's advocate on this project. I can't voice this because my team will really take it negatively, but here's an area that I'm concerned about. The devil's advocate is to give everybody within the organization feeling like they've got a way to share, to vent, to raise concerns, but do it in a safe and neutral environment. So in this case, you are encouraging critical thinking and you're encouraging healthy debate. Don't stand there and say, well, if you got a criticism, then raise it, facilitate it. If the person still is not comfortable presenting, you present it. You have the green light as the devil's advocate. Number 6, ensure that all ideas have given a fair hearing before a decision is made. Make sure that everything gets put on the table. Don't leave anything off. Pull from everybody in the team and everybody that's within the organization their things that they think positive about the idea, the things that they're concerned about the idea, the problems or challenges they foresee trying to make this idea real. What are the roadblocks to making this idea highly successful? Ensure that all of that is given a fair hearing before any decision is made. Number 7, act as a check against groupthink. Remember, groupthink is where people go along with the majority opinion without question. You'll tend to see it when there's an attempt to try to get to a decision quickly. When somebody who's got a power dynamic on the team and is trying to close down debate and say, now we all agree with this, right? Yep, nope, okay, no, everybody agrees, great, we're going to go forward. That is a sign of group think. Devil's advocate is that check against it. You need to jump in and say, whoa, time out. We haven't addressed all the issues. We haven't even collected all the input yet. Let's not get caught up in trying to get to this decision or to kind of corral everybody into this excitement and this energy that this is such a great idea. We need to just get on the bandwagon and start implementing. And number 8, be open-minded and objective without being wedded to any particular position. Remember, being a devil's advocate is kind of like being on the debate team. You may have to argue a side of some topic that you absolutely do not agree with. But you have to be open-minded. You can't say, well, I got to argue this even though I don't agree with it, because that will come across. People will pick up on it. You need to be open-minded. You need to be objective. You need to leave your biases behind. You don't need to be particularly wedded to any one position. Your objective here is to make the idea better in order to extract and encourage people to put out all of the good, the gray area, and the big concerns that you may have about any given idea or innovation effort. So again, be open-minded while being objective, leaving your biases behind. Number 9, see both sides of an argument and understand the different points of view. Even though you're the devil's advocate and you're typically looking at why this project's going to fail or why this idea is a bad idea, and you're piling that on, you need to be able to see both sides of the argument. If you've come up with a criticism, but in your head, you've come up with the solution, you're not the competition. Share with them the idea that you have to solve the problem. You've identified the problem. If you've got an idea in your head about, well, here's a problem with this idea, but as I was thinking about this, here's potentially one way to solve that problem. You're all on the same team. You're trying to make the idea better. If your idea is not just to chuck out problems, if you've got those ideas to solve it, put them on the table. You need to see both sides of an argument and understand those different point of views and literally help on both sides. And number 10, be willing to change their own position if the evidence or arguments presented are compelling enough. You may have been part of the original team that came up with the idea. You may have thought it was a really good idea, but through the process, your position changed. Or you may have been negative to the idea, but as you've been working with the team and they've addressed the concerns you and others have had, now you're seeing the value of the idea. Change your position. Express that change. Let people know, saying, hey, I started here, but I am now here. I now am for it because of this, or I'm against it because of that. Be willing to change your position if the evidence or arguments are compelling enough to cause you to change your mind. So again, those are the 10 rules for being a devil's advocate. And that's the case of where you are being asked by your teams to play that devil advocate role as part of your team to help them improve that overall innovation. Now, over the years, many organizations have leveraged the idea of devil's advocate to improve their decision-making process. So let's talk through some of these examples. So 1, the U.S. military has long used devil advocates to help improve their decision-making. Before any new policy is implemented, they assign someone the role of devil's advocate, and it's their job is to find any potential problems with the policy. Every loophole, every misunderstanding or miscommunication or a lack of clarity. there to find every one of those potential problems with the policy. This helps to ensure that they consider the potential risk before they decide to go forward with a policy change. Another example of an industry that uses devil's advocate is journalism. In journalism, they are used making sure that they consider all sides of a story before it is published. This helps to ensure accuracy, fairness, lack of bias, and avoid any potential libel issues. Third example is the legal profession. They use devil's advocate. Lawyers will use them to consider all the potential arguments that could be made against their case. This helps to ensure that they are prepared for anything that could happen in court. Now, as we wrap up, I want you to think about this role and this importance of a devil's advocate. Just as a church provides a place for people to come together to learn, discuss, debate, and think, so too does the devil's advocate provide a space to discuss, debate, and critically think about an idea. The devil's advocate can help improve the efforts of an organization by ensuring that all options are considered before any decisions are made. When used correctly, the devil's advocate can be a valuable tool for making sure that the best ideas become the next innovation. Of the 10 rules of being a devil's advocate, which is the one that you think is most helpful for your project, the one you're working on right now? For me, it's number 5. Encourage critical thinking and healthy debate. One of the challenges on innovation teams is that everybody wants to get along. Everybody wants to focus on making this idea something that is going to change the world out there. But you need the healthy debate. You need to apply critical thinking. You need to avoid falling into the trap of groupthink. So for me, of the 10 rules, number 5, encourage critical thinking and healthy debate. That is a key role for the devil's advocate, whether that's you yourself playing that role or you're appointing somebody else on your team to be the devil's advocate. Make it clear to them what all the rules are. But for my mind, number 5 plays a really key foundational piece. Again, encouraging critical thinking and healthy, open, transparent debate about the pros and the cons of the idea and challenging the team. And how do you make it better? How do you improve it? Hopefully, with all of this information, equips you with some more choices on how to structure your teams to achieve success with whatever idea or innovation you are currently working on. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule as we are continuing to put out these shows. We would love to hear your feedback. Let us know what's going on, how you're applying this, the challenges you're facing, questions you might have. Things you would love for us to talk about here on the show. Yes, we've been doing the show 18 years. We'll be starting season 19 in March. And so we are always looking for content ideas and questions that you would like answered. Drop us a note. You can do that over at killerinnovations.com, or you can also do it over at theinnovators.network, or you can just send me an email directly, phil@killerinnovations.com. Here's also a deep little secret some of you may not be aware of, but if you are a subscriber to the newsletter, whether you get that newsletter from the innovators.network or from my blog site, philmckinney.com, or from killerinnovations.com, if you get the newsletter, the innovation newsletter from me or from us, all you need to do is reply to the email. It comes right back to me. It gets routed through all the systems and it gets forwarded on to me, and I can see whatever replies you may have. So all you have to do is when you get the newsletter, you can simply do a reply. If you want to sign up for the newsletter, go over to theinnovators.network, and in the top menu bar, you'll see subscribe, hit it, type in your email address, and that's all there is to it. So with that, thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule. Greatly appreciate it. Love to hear some feedback. Let us know. And don't go anywhere. We'll be right back next week with another new episode of Killer Innovations. And until then, don't let the innovation antibodies get you down. Keep working on an idea, launch that innovation, and change the world. Bye-bye.
Podcasting nonstop since 2005, this has been the Killer Innovation Show on the Innovators Network.